On the very day of my husband Adrian's funeral, the man I loved more than anyone else in this world, the one who had walked with me through every joy and sorrow, I felt like a hollow shell. My heart was frozen and shattered with grief. In that moment, standing by his grave with tears streaming endlessly, I suddenly received a message. "Evelyn, it's me. I'm still alive. Stay calm and don't say a word." I kept crying, my mind racing in confusion. If Adrian is dead, then who is texting me? And if he's alive, then who is lying in the coffin? My hands trembling, I typed back, "Who are you?" A notification chimed again. "I can't explain now, but don't trust your two sons." That instant left me breathless. My eyes darted toward my two sons, Lucas and Owen, standing beside their father's grave. Their faces appeared calm, yet beneath that calmness I sensed a shadow of smug satisfaction they were trying to hide. Every now and then, a few forced tears slipped down, followed by a hand covering their mouths yet. Their eyes kept meeting, exchanging subtle winks. That haunting image wouldn't leave my mind, and I knew I had to uncover the truth. And when I did, a reality emerged, one so unthinkable I could hardly believe such a thing could exist in this world. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. I met Adrian when I was only 22 years old, in Dover, a small town with dusty dirt roads and simple dreams. At that time, I was working as a maid to pay for my sick father's medicine, while Adrian looked after the old blacksmith shop he had inherited from his own father. We had no money, but we possessed the most luxurious thing youth can give, the belief that as long as two people held hands, the whole world would open a path for them. On that fateful day, I wore a faded pink dress and shoes with peeling heels. Adrian stepped out of the shop, hands covered in coal dust, and when he saw me, he was so flustered that he dropped his hammer with a loud clang. I burst out laughing, and he blushed, laughing along. "Good morning, Evelyn. Do you need me to check your tools?" he asked. I hadn't brought anything, but I still nodded just for the chance to talk with him a few more minutes. Those clumsy greetings slowly turned into meetings beneath the old pine tree in the town square. We shared with each other the little things, the dishes my mother cooked, the path that led to the riverside, or the smell of smoke clinging to his blacksmith shop. It was those seemingly trivial details that wove a world of our own, where only the two of us existed. One rainy afternoon, Adrian pulled from his pocket an iron ring and whispered, "I'm sorry I have no gold, but steel will bear the mark of years just like this love, never fading." I slipped the ring on, my heart at peace, as if I had just found a lifelong shelter. Our wedding was so simple that the wedding night itself was welcomed by a torrential downpour. The roof leaked, dripping steadily, and Adrian set out buckets to catch the water while laughing. "This is our wedding orchestra." I held him in the rain, believing I was the luckiest woman in the world. The first years of marriage were difficult but warm. A small two-room house, walls peeling, windows creaking whenever the wind blew. Adrian worked tirelessly at the forge, his hands calloused from iron and steel. I sewed clothes for the women in town. Some days, we could only afford one hard loaf of bread, which we broke in half, sitting on the porch, listening to the music drifting from the bar at the end of the street, imagining we were at a grand feast. On cold nights, with only a thin blanket, Adrian pulled me into his arms and whispered, "Then I'll be your second blanket." One sentence warm enough to heat an entire winter. And then we had children. When I gave birth to Lucas, Adrian cried even more than I did. He held the tiny red-faced baby in his trembling arms, overwhelmed with joy. "Welcome to this world. You are our miracle." 3 years later, Owen was born. Adrian welcomed his second son, voice trembling. Now our family is complete. One small house, 2 children, and love enough to withstand the whole world. We had no wealth, but we had love, faith, and children who bore the Hayes name. When I saw Adrian carrying Lucas on his shoulders, while I guided Owen's first steps under the sunset, I believed our heaven had been found right here on this poor land of Dover. Adrian was a wonderful father. He took the boys fishing by the riverbank on weekend mornings, taught them how to hold a hammer, how to stoke the forge, and every night he told them bedtime stories. I cared for them meal by meal, stitch by stitch, holding them close whenever they cried. In those days, we believed this little family would stay bound together forever. But as time went on, the distance quietly began to grow. Lucas, our firstborn, harbored unusual ambition from an early age. Once, he used to listen intently when his father told stories. But now he would walk away mid-sentence to go out with friends, leaving Adrian sitting alone. When his father invited him to go fishing, he answered curtly, "I don't have hours to waste just to catch some stupid fish." Owen, once gentle, slowly followed his brother's lead. When he heard Lucas mock the blacksmith's trade, he sneered, "That's right, Dad. Such a backwards job." I will never forget one dinner. Adrian had saved up to buy a small gift for Lucas's birthday, but he tossed it onto the table, coldly. "This is too cheap. I don't want it." I picked up the discarded gift, tears streaming, while Adrian sat in silence, his shoulders heavy, as if he had just lost a piece of his heart. As he grew older, Lucas grew more ashamed of his humble roots. He dressed in flashy clothes, boasting that one day he would leave this poor little town behind. I often saw Adrian standing on the porch, a cheap cigarette burning in his hand, eyes hollow, no longer the man who once took pride in his home. The breaking point came when Adrian suggested Lucas try working at the forge. He laughed bitterly, his words cruel. "I'd rather die than spend my life filthy like you." The hammer slipped from Adrian's hand, clattering loudly on the ground. I picked it up, but no words could mend that wound. Owen became his brother's shadow. One night, after I stayed up mending him a new shirt, he frowned. "I won't wear this outside. People will laugh at me." From then on, family dinners sank into silence. Adrian still passed the best food to his sons, but they only buried their heads in their phones. Once, Lucas left home for several days, leaving behind a cold note. "Don't look for me. I don't want to live in this shabby place." Adrian scoured the whole town before finding him in a gaming cafe. Instead of coming home, Lucas snapped, "Stop embarrassing me, Dad." I tried to defend them. "They're still young. They'll change." But Adrian only shook his head, whispering into the night, "Evelyn, we lost our sons a long time ago." I sat beside him, hearing his voice break. "Where did we go wrong? Why are they ashamed of us?" There was no answer. Only the starry Dover sky above us bore witness as I held my husband's shoulders, feeling the cracks of heartbreak seep into his every breath. Time went on, and in the eyes of outsiders, Lucas and Owen seemed successful. They wore polished clothes, drove new cars, though few knew they were bought on credit, and spoke with the airs of the city. Townsfolk passing by would whisper, "The Hayes boys are doing well. They're about to change their lives." But behind those expensive suits lay shame for their roots and eyes grown cold toward their very own parents. I once wept with joy when Lucas brought home a beautiful city girl, her golden hair shining, her smile radiant like stage lights. I thought perhaps, at last, my son had found happiness. But that hope shattered quickly. Vivienne was unlike any woman I had ever met. She walked into our house in glittering high heels, moving with the confidence of a queen stepping into her castle. Her first glance was not affectionate or respectful, but one of scrutiny. From the wooden table Adrian had built to the curtains I had sewn through sleepless nights, all of it dismissed with a smirk. Their wedding revealed the truth even more. Adrian and I scraped together every penny to prepare a modest ceremony at the small-town church. The cake had only 2 tiers, the flowers picked from the garden out back. I believed happiness didn't need grandeur. But throughout the ceremony, I caught Lucas's evasive eyes, while Vivienne leaned toward her city friends and whispered, "Such a provincial wedding." Her words struck me like a slap across the face and made Adrian lower his head, hiding his shame behind a forced smile. Day by day, Vivienne asserted herself more. At the dinner table she would sneer. "How cute. It's like a poor little museum house." Under the table, Adrian squeezed my hand tight, but I could feel the cracks spreading in his heart. Then she began planting seeds of bitter ambition in Lucas. "You're far smarter than this town. You deserve greater things, not wasting your life in an old forge or listening to your mother's lectures." With Owen, her voice turned soft, dripping with poison. "You don't have to live under your father's shadow. Just seize the chance, and you'll never have to worry about anything again." Every word from Vivienne was acid, slowly corroding the family bond. Lucas started looking at his parents with cold eyes, while Owen mirrored his brother's steps. Adrian grew quiet and sorrowful, often sitting alone on the porch, as if he already knew he was losing his sons. One afternoon, passing by the living room, I froze. The door was slightly ajar, and inside I heard Vivienne whisper, her voice sweet as sugar, yet sharp as a blade. "Trust me, it will all be yours one day. The house, the land, everything. You just need patience and to know when to strike." My hands shook, nearly dropping the tray of tea. I held my breath, backing away, terrified they would notice me. In that moment, I knew with certainty Vivienne was not a daughter-in-law, she was a viper, turning my family into enemies of each other. That night, Adrian sat in the dark, his eyes red. He whispered, "Evelyn, I'm afraid, truly afraid." I clasped his hands, trying to comfort him, but deep down I knew a storm had begun. As time passed, the small house that had once been our warm haven slowly turned into a silent battlefield. Lucas and Owen were no longer the innocent boys we once raised. Under Vivienne's influence, conversations in our family began revolving around money, gain, and schemes far more than love or kinship. One evening, as we all sat around the dinner table, Vivienne let her eyes wander around the cramped kitchen before speaking, her voice sugary but mocking. "This land is quite spacious, but what's the point of keeping it when you're getting old? If you sold it, Lucas and Owen could use the money to start a company. Only investments can secure the future." I tried to keep a smile, answering softly, "This house isn't just a place to live. It's the life your father and I built." Adrian set his spoon down, his voice turning heavy. "I built this home with my own two hands. It's not some item to be tossed on a market stall." Lucas forced a thin smile, glancing at Vivienne before saying, "Times have changed, Dad. Property that doesn't generate profit is nothing but a burden." Owen stayed silent, only nodding. But in his eyes, I saw ambition flicker like sparks waiting to ignite. A week later, while cleaning, I stumbled upon a strange folder in a drawer. Inside were life insurance documents, the beneficiary listed as Lucas. The policy had been doubled, signed only a few months before. My hands trembled, my heart tightening painfully. When I confronted him, Lucas answered coldly, "This is just a safety measure, Mom. If anything happens to Dad, at least the family won't be left with nothing." I searched his eyes for a trace of sincerity, but found only darkness. That night, Adrian called his sons into the living room. I sat quietly on the stairs, hearing every word. "What do you want from us? Money? If you truly need it, I'll find a way to help. But never touch this house, and never treat life insurance like a game." Vivienne burst out with a mocking laugh, cutting in, "Father Hayes, you're outdated. In the city, everyone knows how to seize opportunity. Sitting on assets without using them is like letting gold rust in the ground." Adrian shot to his feet, his voice booming like thunder. "Be silent. This is not your place to speak, and I will never let anyone treat this family as some bargain to trade." The room fell into dead silence. Lucas lowered his head, Owen shifted uneasily, while Vivienne sat there with a proud smirk, her eyes gleaming with defiance, as though she had already won. In that instant, I realized the true war had begun, and we were already losing inside our own home. From that day on, Adrian began to complain of fatigue, often feeling dizzy. He insisted it was just age and pressure. But inside me, an unshakable dread grew. It felt as though an invisible hand had descended upon our home, waiting for the right moment to push us all into the abyss. Not long after, Lucas and Vivienne no longer lived under our cramped roof. They rented a small apartment near the town center, decorated extravagantly as if to prove they had stepped into another world. Yet they still returned often, carrying with them a domineering air and cold words, treating this house as nothing more than a stopover to control the parents they had left behind. One autumn evening, the wind howled through the tall pines along Dover's main road. Adrian, who rarely went out at night, was urged by Lucas and Vivienne, who brought a bottle of rare wine and coaxed him. "Try it, Dad. I bought it all the way from the city. A real man should raise a glass sometimes, just to feel young again." I found it strange. Adrian had never been one to drink, at most a sip during holidays or when meeting an old friend. Lucas's eyes were unnervingly flat, while behind him, Vivienne's lips curved into an unreadable smile. Adrian hesitated, then finally took a small sip. Moments later, he began to complain of thirst, his vision blurring. I panicked, but Lucas quickly said, "Dad's just a little tired. Let me drive him out for some fresh air." Adrian waved him off, unwilling to trouble his son, insisting on driving his old pickup truck himself. I stood on the porch, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. The headlights swept across Lucas's face, revealing a strange smile that flickered and vanished. That night, a farmer returning late saw Adrian's truck swerving on the road. "It was like the driver couldn't control the wheel anymore," he recounted later. In seconds, the truck veered right and slammed straight into an ancient pine. The metallic crash echoed through the night like thunder heralding a tragedy. By the time the ambulance arrived, Adrian was barely breathing. Doctors suspected a stroke while driving, after finding traces of lorazepam, a sedative commonly used to calm the nerves in his blood. But I knew Adrian had never touched such medicine. I sat at his hospital bedside, clutching his frail hand. For a brief moment, he opened his eyes, lips trembling with a whisper, "Not an accident." Then he slipped into a coma. The seed of suspicion rooted deeply inside me. Lucas and Owen stood nearby, their faces disturbingly calm. Vivienne folded her arms, her eyes gleaming with calculated certainty. As I looked at my children, a chill swept over me. Had they orchestrated this? The next day, the doctor prescribed new medication to stabilize his blood pressure. I was shocked to see Owen speaking privately with the nurse, then signing a consent form to change his father's treatment. When I asked, he only smiled. "Don't worry, Mom. Your son will take care of Dad." But I caught the clumsy falsehood behind that smile. From then on, every day I entered the hospital filled with fear, wondering whether it would be the brutal crash into the tree, or the drug someone slipped into his veins that would kill Adrian first. And deep in my heart I knew this was no fate. This was a plan. After a long struggle, Adrian could no longer endure and slipped into a prolonged coma. He left quietly on a rainy night while I sat there, holding his frail hand. The doctor merely said his heart had stopped too quickly for resuscitation. But inside me, suspicion hung heavy like storm clouds. Was it truly a natural death? The funeral was held on a bleak morning. A light drizzle fell from the church roof, each drop tapping like the rhythm of a sorrowful farewell. I wore a plain black dress, my eyes swollen from sleepless nights. The man who had shared more than 39 years of my life now lay in a cold wooden coffin, and the world around me suddenly felt foreign. The townsfolk came one by one to offer condolences. They wept sincerely, speaking of Adrian as a diligent blacksmith, a kind neighbor, always ready to lend a hand. But when I turned toward the front row where Lucas, Owen, and Vivienne sat, my heart felt as if it would burst. Lucas sat stiff, his face like stone without a single tear. Owen pretended to wipe his eyes, though I saw clearly his hands were dry. And Vivienne, the daughter-in-law I once hoped would bring joy, sat with eyes as sharp as knives, the corners of her lips curling into a fleeting, cruel smile. When the burial began, I stepped to the coffin, laying a trembling hand upon the cold wood, whispering, "Adrian, you will always be my husband." After the ceremony, I lingered alone at the grave. The wind roared through the ancient trees. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. On the screen was an unknown number with a short message, "I'm still alive. Don't trust them." I staggered, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. My heart pounded as I quickly typed back, "Who are you? Adrian has already been buried." The reply came almost instantly. "Don't trust our children. They are watching. Stay silent." I froze, my finger hovering stiffly above the screen. Those words ripped through me like a storm. Was it truly Adrian? Or someone trying to send me a warning? Lifting my head, I saw Lucas and Owen standing with Vivienne at a distance. All three were staring at me. It wasn't sympathy in their eyes, but the gaze of watchmen guarding a terrible secret. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, forcing my face to remain calm. But inside, waves of dread churned violently. If Adrian was truly alive, then who lay inside that coffin? And if he was truly dead, then who was sending me these messages? One thing I knew with absolute certainty: this funeral was not an ending. It was the doorway to a much darker chapter. In the days after the funeral, the air inside the house grew suffocating. The family photos on the walls no longer carried warmth. They stood as silent witnesses to betrayal. I could hardly recognize Lucas and Owen anymore. From their voices to the way they carried themselves, everything had changed, cold, calculating. And whenever they stood beside Vivienne, a chill ran down my spine. One evening, as I stepped into the kitchen, I found Vivienne sitting with Lucas and Owen. Their conversation stopped abruptly the moment they saw me, the air thick with secrecy. I turned to leave when Vivienne's voice rang out, honeyed but venomous. "There are some elderly people. They're no longer clear-minded enough to handle property or make big decisions. Sometimes putting them in a nursing home or medical facility is what's best for everyone." Lucas nodded slightly. Owen lowered his head, but I caught the faint curl of his lips. My chest tightened. They were speaking of me clear as day. The next morning, Lucas handed me an envelope, claiming it was routine health paperwork I needed to sign. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a legal guardianship transfer form. Signing it would give them full control over my assets and medical decisions. I looked straight into Lucas's eyes, my voice shaking but resolute. "You think I'm too old to read? This isn't health paperwork. This is a death sentence for me." Lucas snatched the papers back, his voice sharp with anger. "You're always so suspicious. But sooner or later, everything will be ours." That night, as I sat alone in the darkened living room, fear heavy in my chest, there came a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find a middle-aged man in a dark coat, his eyes both sharp and kind. "Mrs. Hayes? My name is Gideon Park. I once worked for Adrian during my school years. Before he passed, he asked me to help you, if anything ever happened." I froze, then stepped aside to let him in. Gideon set a leather case on the table and opened it, revealing a stack of documents. "You're not alone. I have proof that Adrian's death was no accident. And more than that, I believe they're planning to harm you." I sat motionless, feeling as if the walls of lies around me were beginning to crack. Gideon explained he had worked as a private investigator, and Adrian had hired him months earlier when suspicions about the boys first arose. He handed me a muffled recording taken by Adrian's hospital bed, clear enough to recognize Owen's voice. "As soon as Dad dies and we get Mom into a facility, the house and forge will be in our names. It'll all be over." Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the documents. But this time, they weren't tears of despair. For the first time since Adrian's passing, I felt a spark of hope. Gideon met my eyes with firm resolve. "Mrs. Hayes, we will bring the truth into the light, but it will take your courage. And this house, it isn't safe to talk further. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the cafe on Main Street. My heart pounded, but deep inside I knew, if Adrian had fought until his last breath, then I too could not collapse now. This battle had only just begun. At 62, I had only one weapon left to fight the two men I once called my sons, the truth. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way to rise back to the surface. That night, for the first time since Adrian's death, I allowed myself a faint smile. All of his caution, his instincts, his decision to hire a private investigator, these threads were now guiding me closer to justice. The next afternoon, I wore my most dignified blue dress, the one Adrian used to say made me look like the queen of the town. Slowly, I walked to the cafe on the corner. At exactly 2 o'clock, Gideon Park appeared, his gaze sharp, but his voice steady and warm. "Mrs. Hayes?" "Yes, it's me. And once again, my condolences. Adrian was a good man." He slid another recorder across the table. His eyes met mine, grave. "What you're about to hear will hurt. Are you ready?" I nodded, whispering, "I've been ready since the moment I got that first message." He pressed play. And then Adrian's weary, familiar voice filled the air. "If anything happens to me, Evelyn must know. It wasn't an accident. Lucas and Owen forced me to sign for increased insurance. They claimed it was for your future, but I know the beneficiaries are them." Gideon switched to the next clip. Lucas's voice, sharp as a blade, rang out. "We can't wait any longer. The old man's getting suspicious. Lorazepam will slow his heart. The doctor will think it's just a stroke." Then came Owen's low murmur. "Everything's ready. Tomorrow morning I'll inject it straight into the IV bag." My whole body shook. My hands clenched so tight they bled. The very sons I had raised with blood and tears were plotting to murder their father. Gideon handed me a folder of photographs. Lucas, at a small pharmacy outside town, paying cash for a high-dose sedative. The receipt read, anxiolytic. The batch number matched the test results from Adrian's blood. "Why didn't you go to the police immediately?" I asked, my voice breaking. Gideon sighed heavily. "Mrs. Hayes, they bribed the on-duty doctor. The death certificate says stroke after a traffic accident. No autopsy, just a signature, and that signature was bought." He spread out bank statements. Lucas drowning in $72,350 of debt. Owen crushed under $39,475 from gambling. They were desperate. To them, Adrian was the fastest solution. My veins ran cold. Gideon then pulled out a folded letter. This was written by Adrian. He asked me to keep it, in case. I recognized the shaky handwriting instantly. "Evelyn, if I don't make it, remember this accident is only a mask. I suspect our sons. Don't let them hurt you." I broke down in tears at the table, but within the flood rose a flame. Adrian had known, and he had left me the trail to keep fighting. Gideon laid his steady hand over mine. "Soon, we must take this evidence to the police. If not, in a few days they'll drag you to court, declare you incompetent. After that, they could do anything." I looked out through the cafe window, the sunset gilding the street in gold. In that moment, I swore I could hear Adrian's voice whispering, "Evelyn, stand tall." I wiped away my tears and nodded. "All right, I will no longer be just a grieving widow. I will be the witness and the warrior." Soon after, I went with Gideon Park to the Dover District Police Station. He spread the evidence across the table, photographs, pharmacy receipts, the chilling recordings of my son's voices, and finally, Adrian's trembling letter. The police chief examined the files in silence for a long time, then growled, "We will act immediately. Issue an emergency arrest warrant." Within hours, flashing red and blue lights flooded the streets. Officers read the charges aloud as they handcuffed Lucas and Vivienne outside their apartment. Both resisted, shouting, "You have nothing! You can't prove anything!" Owen was arrested in a bar, his face pale, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He put up little fight, mumbling, "It's not my fault, it's not my fault." For the first time in so long, I exhaled a shaky breath. Justice had begun to move. The day of the trial, the Dover courthouse was packed. Journalists crowded the hallways, townspeople whispered, calling it the family tragedy of the century. I walked into the courtroom in my old black dress, head held high. I was no longer a lost widow. I was the bearer of truth. Lucas sat shackled, forcing a smirk as though he could still defy the world. Owen kept his head bowed, restless. Vivienne clenched her lips, but her eyes were sharp with venom. When the judge entered, silence fell so deep you could hear the turning of pages. The prosecutor began, his voice like steel. "Your Honor, this is not just a criminal case. This is the ultimate betrayal. Sons conspiring to murder their father, plotting against their own mother, all staged to look like an accident." Gideon Park stood, presenting the evidence one by one. First, a photo of Lucas at a small pharmacy, purchasing high-dose lorazepam with cash. The batch number matches the sedatives found in Adrian's blood. Second, bank records showing Lucas drowning in $72,350 of debt, while Owen owed $39,475 to gambling. This is the clear motive: desperation for money. Third, he played the recording. Lucas's voice echoed in the chamber. "We can't wait any longer. The old man's suspicious. Lorazepam will slow his heart. The doctor will think it's just a stroke." Fourth, Owen's whisper, "Everything's ready. Tomorrow I'll inject it into the IV." The courtroom gasped. An elderly woman wept, covering her mouth. Dear God, they killed their own father. Then it was my turn. Standing on the witness stand, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady. I spoke of our poor but love-filled youth, of Adrian, a righteous man, and of the blind trust I had once placed in my children. I looked directly at them, my voice breaking but without tears. "I lost my sons long before I lost my husband. You chose money over family. Today, I no longer call you my children." Lucas shouted back, "You're the traitor." The judge slammed the gavel. "Silence in court." At that moment, Owen suddenly leapt up, hands shaking. "No, it wasn't my fault. It was Vivienne. She told us if Dad died, we'd get the insurance money. She forced me to sign. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't." Chaos erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. Vivienne's face turned pale. She screamed, "Don't pin it all on me. You wanted the money just as much." The judge pounded the gavel again. "Order, order in the court." Owen collapsed into his seat, sobbing. "Father, forgive me. I was too weak. I listened to them." The defense tried to argue about debts and social pressure. But I rose, my voice cutting through the air. "Poverty doesn't kill. Greed does." Applause erupted throughout the courtroom, so strong the judge had to call for silence. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The room held its breath. In the case of the state versus Lucas Hayes and Owen Hayes for first-degree murder of Adrian Hayes, guilty. For conspiracy against Evelyn Hayes, guilty. Accomplice Vivienne Carter, guilty. The judge pronounced sentence: Lucas Hayes and Owen Hayes, life imprisonment without parole for 35 years. Vivienne Carter, 24 years in federal prison. Effective immediately. A crushing weight lifted from my chest. Justice had finally spoken. But justice always demands a price. In prison, Lucas pretended calm until his appeal was denied. Then I received a letter. "Mother, debt and money turned us into monsters. Tomorrow I will end it myself. Please forgive me." The next day, Lucas was found hanged in his cell. Owen unraveled completely, consumed by hallucinations. Each night he screamed, "Father, forgive me." He attempted suicide 3 times, all stopped. In the end, he was transferred to the prison's psychiatric ward, condemned to live in madness and guilt. As for Vivienne, she was sent to a federal women's prison. There, her name spread quickly. The wicked woman who killed her father-in-law for money. The other inmates looked at her with scorn. some calling her outright the Viper. Her arrogance dissolved. She was shoved, beaten in the dark showers, her fine clothes torn, her once shiny hair in tatters. Gone were the city lights, the expensive dresses, the mocking smile. Vivienne was reduced to a trembling shadow in a cold cell. Back in Dover, townsfolk erected a memorial plaque outside the old forge. Here lived Adrian Hayes, a man of honesty, who died at the hands of his own children's greed. Each time I passed, I whispered, "Adrian, do you see? The truth has triumphed." I sat in our old house, lost in thought, recalling both the happiest days and the darkest nights of my life. But this time, I did not cry alone. I lit a candle and whispered, "Adrian, do you see? At last, justice has spoken. To honor my husband, I established the Flame of Truth Foundation, dedicated to helping victims who have been betrayed and abused within their own families." When asked what gave me strength, I answered simply, "Love itself." It held me upright even when everything else collapsed. Our story was written into a book, later made into a documentary. The image of Adrian, his gentle smile, his calloused hands, moved many to tears. Yet people also found hope in the courage of a wife who dared to rise for the truth. For me, the rest of my life is about keeping my promise to Adrian to turn pain into light. At his grave, I always whisper, "You did not leave in vain. Your name will live on in the hearts of those saved by this legacy." This is not only the ending of a family tragedy, it is also a reminder to the world. There are things money can never buy, and justice will always find its way into the light. If this story has touched your heart, please hit like, share this video to spread its message, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next powerful and meaningful stories to come.